Well, howdy doody once again. Here we are with the second part of the reading on Elk County in Kansas that William Heat Moon has explored extensively. And this is the composite story of pioneers in that county in the 19th century. So here we go. One July, the Kaws showed up and she gave out watermelons. Might as well, they'd steal them anyway. And oh, did they love them. Her littlest boy staring at the braves, and one of them pulling out his long knife and brandishing it, and cutting off a slice of melon, and giving it to Johnny, and he eating, and another urged on him, and he ate it, and another, and ate it too, and braves watching, and another, and had to sit. Let the boy learn a lesson. With his stomach round and hard like a melon itself, and the Injuns reaching down and tapping it, and the men laughing and wiping clean their knives, and each rising and tapping the little brown belly before moving on. The oldest boy accidentally shooting an arrow into the face of his Kaw friend, and the mother appearing at the cabin to seek reparation, gave her a calf. 6 years after statehood, he went out with the governor to ask aid from the War Department to drive out them dang Injuns. And she said, all they ever done was scare us. Crops busted and took work carrying mortar at the new county capital and setting a bright penny in wet concrete under a stone. The little girl came down with typhoid and shook so bad it broke your heart. And she wrapped her in blankets and set her outside in the spring sun. And still the little thing shook. Later he said, Death come into our house 4 times. And the afternoon the child went, she chattered out, Am I dying, Papa? Sometimes the whole night she'd hear the Kaws up on the hill where their dead lay buried, wailing and moaning, and that was the worst sound on the prairie. And then one spring she realized she hadn't heard them that year, and she never did again. Played the melodeon and filled the place with Blue Juanita, Paddle Your Own Canoe, and Money Musk. And Lordy, could she make that thing sing. Took his gun and went out west to Dodge City and came back with buffalo hides and meat enough for the winter. And she joked, You ain't no better than an Indian now. And that December she put hot rocks in the sleigh and wrapped them all in buffalo robes, and they went to town. On one hunt, the boy had to stay in camp and sit there and grumble and crack open buffalo shin bones, to fill a 2-gallon bucket with marrow, and it was good on pancakes. I always believed any man who worked wearing gloves couldn't ever be a success. Of course, excepting the miller, who had to keep the feel in his right hand. It's the clock. Except, of course, the miller, who had to keep the feel in his right hand so he could judge the texture of millings. Wanted religion in small doses, real small, and got older and found he could make a speech if they asked him, and he did. And he often spoke, in those later years, how he saw resources being wasted by grasping men. And a friend saying, "Ain't there more than enough?" Walking up the hollow that day, done it 50 times before, but that morning the big plum thicket swirling with hummingbirds, hundreds and hundreds, and she told them all the way into the next century. She told about them all the way into the next century. If it wasn't one thing, it was another. The youngest, not 2 years old, sitting out watching his brothers play, and from the high grass came a wild hog and got him by the dress and dragged him off towards the break, and she running and screaming and throwing everything she could find until the boar dropped him. Humane assistance parcels from the East in the early years, and he opened theirs to find 3 moth-eaten suits and 3 stovepipe hats and 3 ladies' ballroom dresses with matching slippers. And he set a hat on his head and said, "Dost thou waltz, my lady?" The neighbours south gave up, but he told her, "We'll live to see the day this land is worth $40 an acre." Carried with her into the county a piece of roseroot called Queen of the Prairie, and set it out, and lived to see it cover the entire front of the cabin with pink blossoms. If it wasn't raining on Sunday and the circuit preacher got through, they moved the furniture outside to make room for the neighbours and washed the children for the sermon. And nearly any day the wind was down, they could hear the old bachelor who lived a mile off calling to the Lord to get him through another month, praying so loud he must have figured God was deaf. And one day she didn't hear him any more either. Raised 4 children, lost 3, typhoid, diphtheria, consumption. But when she arrived in the county, she was sure it would be snakes that got them all. And she said, "I learned what the Lord's real serpents is." Grew older, and sometimes he thought about selling out and moving into Strong and conducting the horse trolley and sitting down to earn a living. Thinking maybe they should move out there to Pasadena. The daughter said to come on out. Reminisced about the first days, how out riding he found the human teeth on the big rock, and figured someone had been eaten by wolves, and came to find out Mrs. Oh, you remember, had lost her dentures a couple of years earlier in the tornado that killed the husband just before she moved to Oklahoma. And he mailed them to her, and Mrs. wrote back and said thanks, and they still fit just fine. Reminisced about how she put that small jar of butter down in the spring and forgot about it. And 2 years later, he cleaned the spring and found the butter, and they ate it that night. In his last years, the Confederate prison sickness finally turning him into an invalid, and he spent his time carving chessmen and small canteens from black walnut, laid in with designs of cottonwood river clamshell. And one afternoon said to her, "Everyone was young in Kansas in them days." And she said, If my eyes was good, I'd think I was young. She was 84. She died from a kick of a mule after inhaling gas when he was digging the schoolhouse well. When high water took him, and the mill and the boat over the dam at Cottonwood, at the crossing under a locomotive, struck by lightning, fell off his horse into Diamond Creek. And she buried him in that homemade shirt she brought from Scotland 63 years earlier, and she tended the grave for a decade. She outlived them all, and not a day went by but what she wondered, who will attend me? Gosh. What can you say? We had it tough, we've got it easy. Well, I enjoyed reading those excerpts, and I certainly hope you all enjoyed listening to me reading them. I'll try and find something else to read. I enjoy doing these. I'd like to turn them into MP3 files and have a podcast. We'll see what happens. Well, cheerio. Love to you, Laurie. Love to you, Mitch. Love to the girls. Love to Yoli. Love to everybody. Good night now.